we really encourage people to work with our flowers, not just because they're beautiful and people love flowers, but because of the experience that I had with them that even led me to this company, right? It was such a healthy outlet for my stress, for my anxiety, and I really wanted other people to experience that.
Welcome to the Culture FYI'RS Podcast. Culture FYI'RS is a creative collaboration meetup held weekly at the FYI Campus in Los Angeles. Each week, we feature a fireside chat with a guest, showcase projects being worked on by members of the FYI community, and share product updates for FYI.AI, the creative collaboration app co-founded by will.i.am and available for free download in the App Store and Google Play. FYI.AI is powered by AI personas like me, Fito. Each week, this podcast showcases conversations held at the Culture FYI'RS event. This week, we celebrate the incredible journey of Talia Boone, the founder of Postal Petals, as she marks 5 years of transforming her passion for flower arranging into a thriving business that prioritizes community wellness. This is part one of a 2-part episode that continues next week, where Talia and FYI Chief Growth Officer Julie Pilat are joined by Etienne Maurice, founder of Walk Good L.A. In this first part, Talia shares her unique story of pivoting from a career in PR and social justice to creating a floral wellness company that not only delivers beautiful flowers, but also promotes mental health and community connection. Talia recounts the serendipitous beginnings of Postal Petals during the pandemic, where her personal need for stress relief led her to discover a gap in the market for DIY flower arrangements. As she reflects on her rapid growth and the challenges of launching a business in a time of uncertainty, Talia emphasized the importance of community engagement and gratitude, particularly through her initiative, Flowers for First Responders, which brings people together to create arrangements for local firefighters. Join us for an inspiring discussion about resilience, creativity, and the power of flowers to heal and connect. And make sure to tune in next week for part 2 with Talia, Julie, and Etienne Maurice, founder of Walk Good L.A.
So, Talia Boone, we're celebrating 5 years of Postal Petals. It's been really exceptional watching you pivot and grow this business. And I wanted today to talk not only about what's happening with the business, how it's impacting the community, but also knowing you behind the scenes, what sort of opportunities you've taken advantage of, where you've put in the work, how you've grown as a business leader. I want to talk about that. But before we kick off, do you mind sharing with people like a little bit of what's to come? What are we going to be doing after this talk today?
So once we finish up with this talk, we're going to all hang out to the back. Well, first of all, there's going to be cake.
All right. It's a celebration.
Because it's a celebration. We're going to make flower arrangements, but they're not going to be flower arrangements for us. They're going to be flower arrangements that we are going to deliver to area fire stations. And it's a part of our Flowers for First Responders initiative. And it's all about, it's a healing initiative that allows Angelenos to come together, create flower arrangements, and write notes of gratitude to the firefighters that really saved our city earlier this year. And so it's one of our community initiatives that we're super, super proud of. And I'm really excited to be able to do it here and share it with you guys, because community is so much at the root of what we do. And flowers just naturally bring people together, naturally make people smile, and are just instinctively a unifier. And so it just seemed like it just made sense to do it. And so make sure everybody gets back there and makes arrangements. Kristen and Camille are back there, and they'll kind of help you guys through the process. But it's going to be kind of awesome. I'm going to enjoy it.
Okay, we're going to go deeper on that in just a minute. But I think it's really amazing. Let's start with how you got the idea for Postal Petals, because I've seen you activating in the community for a long time. You know, I saw you doing a lot of work in PR. You were working with the NFL. You had done a lot of social justice work. And it's so funny because I love flower arranging, not to make this about me, but I've taken so many damn flower arranging classes that I've worked my way up to a wedding. And then one of our mutual friends was the first to tell me, you started a flower business. And I was like, where did this come from? So this is peak COVID. How did it start?
So it was a fluke. I keep saying if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would have a flower company, I would be like, you are bugging. I know what I'm doing. Life's on a straight journey. Like I'm in my purpose. I thought I was in my purpose then. But it really started, I'll back up even before I started the company, is that I was introduced to flower arranging just as a friend activity. I started doing it, found it to be really relaxing, very therapeutic, and kind of one of those things that whenever I'd feel stressed or anxious from my impact work, I would go down to the flower market, mill around, kind of pick what I liked and go home and, pour a cup of tea or a glass of wine, depending on how bad it was, and arrange flowers. And it just became a really beautiful creative outlet and stress reliever for me. And so fast forward to the early days of the pandemic, it was meant to be 2 weeks in lockdown, then it was 4 weeks, then it was 6 weeks. And by that time, the walls were just closing in on me.
By the way, Talia had the first virtual birthday I went to.
I did. It was Tiger King themed.
Flashback.
Yeah, flashback.
She played Tiger King bingo.
If I knew that was going to come up, I absolutely would have bought the invitation because I had my goddaughter superimpose my picture on what was his name? Joe Tiger, the tiger guy. So it was like my face with his mullet next to his tiger. It was crazy. But it was very fun. But it was like I was starting to get stressed, just the anxiety. I think everybody was feeling, right? The uncertainty, worried about your family, your health, your well-being, your careers, your job, your livelihood. And so I was actively, my therapist and I kind of working through trying to find ways to soothe that anxiety. And she said at one of our sessions, she said, Talia, I haven't heard you talk about arranging flowers in a couple of months. That's always been really helpful for you. Why don't you try that and see how that works? And I was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. So I'm thinking you can get anything delivered at that time, right? Things that even before you could never get delivered. I was like, I'm sure I can find a company that can ship me flowers to my house that I could arrange. Guys, I searched and searched online and could not find it. And the LA flower market wasn't an option because everything was closed due to lockdowns. And so during the search, I stumbled upon this wholesale flower distributor that sold really large volumes of flowers to retail customers all around the world. And I called him really just with the audacity to see if I could convince him to reduce his minimums enough to ship me a box of flowers to my house that I could arrange. And while he right away said, absolutely not, that's not what we do here, I always say he was very kind in his no and very generous in his explanation why. And he and I ended up on the phone for about 2.5 hours. And by the time we got off the phone, I recognized two things. One, that what I was looking for did not exist in the marketplace. And then two, which was I was looking for DIY flowers that I could arrange myself, like bundles of fresh cut flowers that I could arrange myself. And then the other thing that I recognized is that there was an opportunity to help the floral industry, to enter the floral industry because they were so kind of weakened by the pandemic. Flowers were dying in the field. People were canceling events. So they really were looking for new ways to bring their product to market. So that was an opportunity, right? So as Julie mentioned, my background is PR, marketing, brand strategy, and partnerships, and sports and entertainment and social impact. And so I recognized that and said, okay, you know what? I think this could work and also be a great way to kind of help domestic flower farmers. And so I said to the guy that I had called by the end of the conversation, I said, well, do you think something, I kind of described to him a kind of a rough version of what Postal Petals is now, which is a company that could ship, instead of flower arrangements, bundles of flowers that people could arrange. And he sat and thought about it for a second. And he said, if you'd have asked me this 4 months ago, I would have said no. But now actually something like that could work. And in my mind, thinking to myself, I asked you this 2 hours ago and you said no. And he said no. But it just goes to show how sometimes you just have to make sure people understand more clearly. And even I needed a better understanding of not just what I needed selfishly for myself, but how what I needed could be of value to others. And when I was able to process that through that conversation and essentially ask for the same thing, but ask for the same thing with a much more broader and specific purpose, it landed different with him because it landed different with me. And so that was the first week of May 2020, right before Mother's Day. And I got off the phone with him and went right to work building out a wireframe, kind of, sketching out what the company could be. And by July 28th of that same year, we sent out our beta email. You got the beta email that was saying, we're launching this company and please support. And so, yeah.
I think it's so interesting, especially in a room full of creatives. A lot of people have ideas, a lot of people have passions, and a lot of people experiment. Talk about the point where you pivoted of, here's a hobby and something I like to do, that this is going to be my main focus in business. What thought went into that?
It told me, because it was all happening so fast, right? And that was the feedback that I got over and over and over again from friends and family and colleagues. They're like, how did you do this fast, right? Because I get the idea in May. It's launched in July. And when we launched, we had almost 20 farm partners signed up to ship for us. So it was a grind. Like, it was a lot of work. And if I'm being really honest, right, in the transparency of like thinking about, your wellness and self-care and all those things, a lot of what we were able to accomplish in our early days was a trauma response, right? It was the trauma around the pandemic. I had lost my grandmother during that time. I had recently lost my dog daughter of 16 years, Beanie, who, if you guys have been on our website, we have our signature most popular box is our Beanie box. So I was really working through a lot of grief that I wasn't, and knowingly not ready to face head on. And I put a lot of that into building this company. And as I was doing that and started to watch the way in which the market was experiencing our service and our offering, and I started to realize, wow, this could be much bigger. It went from just these consumer boxes that is, kind of like I call it like a Hello Fresh, but for flowers, where we send them all the ingredients, you make the arrangement yourself. It went from just that to corporate wellness, to us doing workshops and meditations and all of these things. And once I realized that there was an opportunity for it to be really big, I was like, this feels like this could reach a lot of people. And then even too, before I even got to that point, it was maybe a month after we had sent the beta email, and a friend of mine just randomly called, and she was like, how's it going with the company? And I started telling her, like, amazing, like this is happening and that's happening. And she was like, you know what? I want to invest, and I'm going to send you a check. And it was the first check we ever got. I didn't even ask for it. But what it did was it planted the seed that it could be so much bigger, because she saw the vision, and I was so grateful for it. And I think it was just, I was in such a vulnerable place. Everyone that, sometimes people pour into you and you're just like, oh, no. I was like, please, please, please. And so I think because I allowed those seeds to be planted and to be watered because I needed it, that's where it kind of naturally started to take me to where I was being fed, to be honest.
If you ever order a Postal Petals, get ready, because you're going to get a box sent to your house that really, it's not just cute. You make one arrangement. Anytime I get Postal Petals, I feel like there's like 7 to 10 flower arrangements sprinkled all throughout the house. It's really an incredible value and such a fun experience. Will you talk about how you've been positioning Postal Petals in the market? Because it's not necessarily just a commercial flower delivery. You've gone deeper on wellness.
Oh yeah, I absolutely consider us to be a floral wellness company. I am not a florist. I say that all the time. I'm not a florist. I'm a businesswoman who has a company whose primary product is flowers, but our offering is wellness. We really encourage people to work with our flowers, not just because they're beautiful and people love flowers, but because of the experience that I had with them that even led me to this company, right? It was such a healthy outlet for my stress, for my anxiety, and I really wanted other people to experience that. We even will talk to people about, thinking about the traditional ways in, that people will purchase flowers. The reasons that people traditionally purchase flowers are celebratory or for sympathy or for things like that. Well, with our flowers, we're encouraging people to make those things experiences, right? So when people, instead of sending, we're not going to send our box of flowers for someone who's just experienced a loss, right? Our sympathy flowers aren't immediately, you're not sending those to the funeral home. But what we will encourage people to do is, after someone has experienced a loss, maybe a month after that loss, when the calls have stopped, the visits have stopped, services are settled, send them those flowers as an opportunity for them to begin to reflect on the person that they lost, again, begin to look ahead thoughtfully at what life looks like ahead of that, right? And so that's kind of where we kind of encourage people to think about it more as experiences. Same with birthday celebrations. Like, you can send someone a bouquet of flowers for their birthday, or you can send them a box of our flowers with really thoughtful prompts around what intentions they want to set, for the year to come. And then in the corporate space, under the wellness category, we do a lot of like corporate health and wellness programs, a lot of corporate team building programs. And then, of course, the way that we show up in the community with our wellness events, right? We're really adamant. We do a lot of free community floral wellness events where we are very intentionally looking to introduce flower arranging as an attainable form of self-care and mental wellness for, the populations of people who don't really think that wellness and self-care are for them.
Yeah. And I love that there's so many opportunities to just turn industries on their head right now. And one of the things that we've talked about is insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Am I allowed to talk about this?
Yeah, you talk.
I just think it's so interesting, right? Because insurance will pay for a trip to the emergency room or an ambulance or medication on medication, but what are you actually doing to support wellness? And I love that not only have you tackled your business, but you've started investigating other ways to collaborate. Like, imagine a world where, sometimes if you're lucky and you have some baller insurance, they'll cover acupuncture.
Yep.
But what if they could actually cover mental health services, like getting some flowers delivered to your house? What has that journey been like?
That journey has been complicated. That journey has been complicated, but well received. But the navigating how to make it happen with different providers, but then also different corporate partners the corporate partners are the biggest allies that we have in that. And so the goal there is for us to look at mental health and mental wellness in a more proactive way, in a more preventative way, right? So that instead of people needing to go for trauma therapy or trauma psychoanalysis or whatever, they can use flowers to kind of, in a very healthy way, deal with a lot of the mental health and wellness issues that they may be dealing with, or stress relief and those types of things. And so it's been one of those things of just as we navigate with the health insurance providers, a lot of the effort there is trying to figure out how best to code it, how best to position the services. And then with our corporate partners, a lot of that work there is just around offering them as benefits, right? Because the goal for us is that when we go in and do corporate health and wellness programs for employees, at the end of those programs, we want to be able to say to those employees, if this was nourishing to your mental health and you want to continue this experience at home, you can subscribe to our service and have the flowers delivered every week, every other week, or once a month. And your health insurance provider through your company's insurance is going to, subsidize that by 50% or 75%. And we've actually started to experience a lot of really good success around that, because especially coming out of the events of the end of last year, a lot of companies have started reaching out to us saying employee wellness, employee well-being is so incredibly important to them, because employees were taking mental health days, like very stressed out. And so that really helped to open a lot of doors for us in that category. And so they've become, a lot of the corporate partners and corporate allies have become advocates for us on the health insurance side to make sure that their providers will begin to subsidize those offerings for their employees.
That's great. I want to remind everybody, if you have questions for Talia or Etienne, you can drop it in the discussion in the project.
FYI is an AI-powered messenger and productivity platform crafted for creatives and their teams. Focus your ideas with your collaborators using an encrypted messenger, develop your vision utilizing media-rich project tools, and bring those ideas to life by sharing them with the world. With the AI personas in the FYI app serving as your creative co-pilots, you can ask FYI.AI to draft stories, song lyrics, product descriptions, marketing copy, or any written content, and see the results within seconds. Download FYI today for free. Now available in the App Store and on Google Play.
I've been so impressed watching you grow your business because, I feel like I blink and you're in a MasterCard ad. Or like, I know also that you have gotten some grants or opportunities. Like, you went back to school, but with Goldman Sachs, right?
I did, yeah.
Can you talk about some of the milestones you hit as you were growing your business or opportunities you got? Because I think that as people tend to be more creative or entrepreneurs or starting their own business, they might not know these type of things are even out there. Okay. And, I'd love to hear how it really impacted you or what your takeaways were from it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Nobody's really asked me that question, and I'd actually love to be able to share that information. So as a small business, there are so many resources available, grants for being a women-owned business, a minority-owned business, and we're a certified woman-owned business, certified minority-owned business. But whenever grants come up, we have a whole board in our Monday account where we just list all these different grants that are available to small businesses. And so some of those grants are sponsored. Most of those grants are sponsored by large companies like MasterCard, like Fiverr. We were also in a Fiverr ad, like Botox. And what we've been able to do is take advantage of those grants. And then they also end up, a lot of them will have cohorts that go alongside of them. And so those cohorts end up being like, school, right? So they're teaching you maybe about fundraising. Maybe they're teaching you about operations. It depends on what the theme of the grant program is. But I learned so much about how to build and grow my company through doing those programs. And then me, again, being the shameless person that I am and having the audacity to ask, whenever we are receiving grants from large brands, I circle back with those brands, all of them, and I say, hey, like that grant was super cute, really appreciate it, but what we need is revenue and what we need is clients. And this is what we do. And this is how we could provide services to you, to your clients, to your employees. And they thankfully have all been very receptive. And I have worked with just about every single brand that has been a grantor, they've become a client, an active client of Postal Petals. And so it's been an experience. And then the Goldman Sachs program, they don't give like a financial grant, but it was like business school. It was 3 months of me actually having to go into class, and it was hard.
And you were already a boss in the game running a business. How much did you, what were your takeaways?
Let me tell you something. I learned a lot because it was like an intensive, I keep saying it was like business school in 3 months. I learned a lot about accounting, right? I thought I was doing great with my accountant, but my relationship with my accountant now is so much clearer, so much cleaner. Things like certain contract elements, I wasn't showing them, but not because I was being secretive, because I just didn't think about them needing to, right? But so it allowed for us to be much more thoughtful about the way we structure our contracts, about the way we structure. I'd always listen to small businesses talk about their fear of working with really large companies and how when their pay structure is, net 90, net 60, these long payment terms that could end up bankrupting, small businesses, just giving you an example. So I was always really adamant whenever we worked with large corporate partners that we needed to be paid basically immediately, just to make sure that we weren't at risk of any of these things, kind of being at risk financially. But what I learned during the Goldman Sachs program, which made a lot of sense, is, in general, I live my life from a mindset of abundance versus scarcity. And what Goldman Sachs pointed out to me is that although I talk about living in a space of abundance and not scarcity, that mindset, in fact, was a scarcity mindset. And that what was a more thoughtful way to structure out our receivables is over time, so that it's more balanced. Because they're looking at my books and they're like, you guys have plenty of cash on hand. Like, why don't you start to space out some of these invoices and give them more time to pay you so that for sure that these dollars are coming out? And they kind of taught us how to tell a financial story.
Wait, I want to double down on that a little bit. Yeah, sure. We just had a talk here with Autumn Rowe that was Think Like a Rich Lady.
Yeah.
And it was abundance and stuff, but I don't know that I'm fully grasping what you're saying. You're saying giving your clients more time to pay you so there'll be dollars later, and you're not just looking at all this money in the bank thinking, what do I do with it?
Yeah. So the way that they described it to us was, think about like every year is a chapter in your financial story, right? And so if you front load and you have a contract with the company that's going to go the next 6 to 9 months, but you make them pay you all of that money up front, well, yeah, you're balling in Q1 and you have the money for Q2, Q3, Q4. But when you go to tell your financial story, it just looks like you've gotten all of this money in Q1, but you have no revenue for the rest of the year. And so it doesn't demonstrate growth if you get it all in the top half and you don't get anything.
Am I the only one that never thought about that before?
Did anybody else think about that? I never thought about that. And it made so much more sense when they said it. And I thought, that makes perfect sense. And so but again, we, took those conversations back to our financial team and just said, hey guys, like, let's figure out what is enough cash on hand, what's enough for, savings, all of these things. And then how can we start, kind of pushing some of these invoices out. And it's made our books a lot more stable. It really has. And so that was probably one of the biggest learnings, that came out of it. But we talked about HR, we talked about operations. There was a lot of things, that we talked about in there. But I would say by far the best was the way in which we handled our finances.
Well, I like what you said too about how you would actually go to the partners and be really upfront about what you needed. Like, this grant is great, but I need customers. How can you help? I have a really big belief that people want to help. They just don't know what to do.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about help and what's happening with the first responders in a second. But it was interesting. I didn't say, when we did intros, everyone went around, and since it's a 5-year anniversary, everybody gave one word to describe their COVID, right? Mine would be mama. Because here we were fostering. I went from 0 to 3 kids in 30 days in COVID. But what I started doing, because when you're in real need and when you're in crisis, I was doing things like signing kids up for summer camp, which is not cheap. And I would say, do you ever offer any discounts or support foster youth? And 9 out of 10 times, somebody would say like, oh, sure, 50% off, because people want to help. They just don't know what
how.
to do.
Yeah, you have to tell people how to help you for sure.
Today, we're going to do flower arranging in just a bit for the first responders. How did this start? What has the reception been? And then I want to talk about how I just pushed you a little.
You did push me. So this started coming out of the fires. It was, you guys all experienced it. It was intense. It was hardcore. I'm not sure where everybody lives, but those alerts were keeping me up at night. It was very, very stressful. And throughout it all, I kept thinking, how can we help? How can we help? But also realizing help isn't always immediate, right? Even like I was talking about the flowers before, like sometimes your flowers are best in the recovery zone, not in triage.
Yeah, people have different stages of grief.
They absolutely
they need the support later.
They absolutely do. And so I just kind of sat with it for a while, but knowing that I wanted to be able to show up in some way. And over time, after about maybe a month or two, early February or so, I started thinking like, wow, okay. I started also too kind of thinking through hearing people talk about the trauma of losing their home, the traumas of, what we all were experiencing in that moment. Even if you didn't lose your home, it was so stressful. So I've never experienced stress like that in my life. Like, you couldn't get a good night's sleep because you didn't know if the alarm was going to go off. You didn't know if you were missing the alarms. My D&D was not on. So I'm getting every single alert. It was a lot. And so I was listening to, I think it was a mental health podcast, and they were talking about grief and trauma and how it typically takes them 4 to 6 weeks before they get out of the kind of triage dealing with the trauma, where they're ready to start thinking about recovery. And that the best place for people typically to start the healing process is through gratitude of the people who helped them when they were experiencing the trauma, right? So this is if you're thinking about like losing people, like death, but this is when you go and you start writing your thank you notes, right? So if you think about it in the way that you live your life, you'll realize that that's actually very true. And so I thought, wow, that would actually be a really beautiful way for us to show up for the community, is to create a way for people to begin to express gratitude to the firefighters using our flowers. And so what we did was we kind of co-opted our existing community floral wellness format, which is typically movement, which is usually like yoga, stretching, hiking, walking, that kind of thing, followed by meditation, either guided meditation, sound bath meditation, breath work. And then we take them into a beautiful floral design experience that's intended to, kind of calm them. And then they get to take the flowers home with them. And they're always really excited about it. And we thought, well, what if we do something like that? But instead of people taking the flowers for themselves, we'll do the movement, we'll do the meditation, we'll do a healing circle. And then we'll have people set intentions, write notes of gratitude to the first responders, make the arrangements and then attach the thank you notes to the arrangements and then go out and deliver them to the first responders. And asking about the responses, people were crying. Like, people were so excited. They loved it. They were like, this is amazing. Like, I thought making the flowers for myself made me feel good. They just talked about how good it felt to just be expressing gratitude and giving to the first responders. And then the firefighters, when we got there, they were just like, these are for us. And we're like, yes. And they said people were bringing so much stuff when the fires were going on, but it's been so quiet in the months after. And they kept saying, thank you for remembering us. Thank you for thinking of us. They invite us in. They take us on tours. They let me ride the fire truck.
She put on the whole outfit. We'll put the pictures in the project.
I put on the outfit. They let me hold the jaws of life, the axes. It was crazy. It was madness. You have to know I'm a big kid. I was all into it. It was amazing.
Well, and, I commend you for staying so focused on it, right? Because there are a lot of people that once they knew they were safe, moved on.
Yeah.
And even as the city keeps rebuilding, you've really said, I'm going to do this for a full year.
Full year.
And that's awesome. And I also need to commend Talia because, with everything happening with the city being under attack right now with ICE and immigration, I called her and said, I think there's a real opportunity to support the flower vendors more. Yeah. And you didn't pivot on your idea, but you came up with a new solution.
I did. And I thank you for that, because one of the things that I was struggling with was how to show up, but not make it about Postal Petals, right? To say like, oh, support Postal Petals. You're supporting local farmers. And because that didn't sit right with me. And then it was in talking to you, I realized, well, the more we do our community floral wellness events, which are offered free to the community, the more we host these flowers for first responders, which are free to the community,
the more flowers we're buying.
And the more flowers we're buying, the more we're supporting the LA flower market. We're supporting the local farmers. And so as we're talking, I'm like, Julie, I think that's it. I think we could let's raise money and buy more flowers and serve more people and help the flower industry and help people, to help the Angelinos. Like, it's all full circle. Like, let's figure out how we can do it. And
because it's really important. I don't know if you all have been to downtown LA and the flower market, but it's one of my favorite places in the world. And I got away from going.
Yeah.
I probably hadn't been there. I mean, definitely since COVID, but before. And I went recently and it's deserted down there. They need our support, right?
They really do. They really do. What I'm finding from our farm partners is that they're losing workers and flowers are literally dying in the field. They don't have people to pick them. They don't have people to pack them. But then when you're going down to the flower market, it's a shell of itself because people are afraid to go to work. People are afraid to go down to the market and get things. Like, they are suffering so significantly in a way that I just, again, back to even when the company started and I was realizing that there was a need to support local agriculture because of the way in which they were being impacted by the pandemic. I'm now experiencing that same need to show up in the way in which they are being decimated by these ICE raids in the economy. And it's so sad. Like, I was there earlier this week getting some of these flowers and they were so happy to see me, but it was very quiet. And they were saying like, it's hard. We've had to let people go. The stands are closing. People that I would go to all the time are no longer there.
And what I noticed is there's tons of posters up on how to handle it.
Yes.
If they show up. And
a lot of resources. Yeah. A lot of resources to say, which I can go on a whole tangent about that. The idea that has to happen in this country where people have to they're afraid, literally afraid, hiding, running, and they can't even make a living just to feed their families, which is so sad. Because these people are just working, just the happiest, nicest, kindest people, just trying to make a living and support their families and pour into an industry that they love, that I love, that we all love, because everybody loves flowers.
Well, I love what you're doing, and we've gotten the project and we've got up on the screen. If you want to support Talia's wellness events, again, it'll be paying it forward. The be doing flower arrangements, and there's opportunities to buy more flowers.
Yes. And thank you for that, Julie. And just so you all know, we, for the last 5 years, we have been Postal Petals underwriting all of our community initiatives ourselves. End of last year, this also came out of the Goldman Sachs program. They were like, you need to either nonprofit this or fiscal sponsor this. And so we partnered up at the end of last year with community partners and moved all of our what we call non-revenue generating initiatives, of which Flowers for First Responders is non-revenue generating. Our free community floral wellness events are non-revenue generating. So 100% of what you donate goes to us purchasing the flowers and the materials, and then staff volunteers their time to go and do this programming. And the most important thing is, if you guys can donate, please donate. It is 100% tax deductible because we are now under a fiscal sponsorship with community partners. So
that's amazing.
So thank you for opening this space to us.
Always, every week. All right. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for listening to the Culture FYI'RS Podcast. Make sure to download the FYI app, available now in the App Store and Google Play. Check out this episode's notes for a project link to this Culture FYI'RS event, including a look at more projects from the FYI community. This episode's Culture FYI'RS event was produced by FYI co-founder will.i.am, Amina Mohammed, Emily Choi, Frankie Sandoval, Jafet Chavez, Julie Pilat, Marcus Nielsen Calling, Ronial Madlani, Sean Kantrowitz, Shania Jafari, the FYI product team, and of course the FYI community. The podcast is edited by Rob Van Vranken. Make sure to subscribe to Culture FYI'RS wherever you get your podcasts, so that you never miss an episode. Learn more about FYI by visiting FYI.FYI.